Okay, I guess we'll get going. So, my name is Jim Gerritsen. I'm an organic farmer in northern Maine. And I imagine people will trickle in, but we better get going. We've got 5 more speakers before you have supper tonight, so I don't want to hold that up and make it late. Okay. I found this map in the last year, and I love maps to begin with, and this one is a beautiful one to me. It's from 1922, and the title is "The Greatness of the United States is Founded on Agriculture," and I think everybody in this room can agree with that. This is a great country, and it's founded on agriculture, and it's founded on farmers taking care of the land and growing good crops for our people. Now, one way to grow good crops is to be a certified organic farmer, and this map represents the certified organic farms in the United States. And I don't have a pointer, but if you go all the way that way, and then go all the way up that way, you've got 2 or 3 red dots. That's where we are in Maine. We're 6 miles from Canada. And we don't get crowded out up that way. That is a photograph of our farm. It's part of the unorganized territory of Maine. Maine is the most forested state in the country. 90% of Maine is in trees. In this Township D, Range 2, part of the unorganized territory that takes up half of the state of Maine, the townships are organized on a 6 by 6 mile basis, 23,000 acres. In our township, there are 8 residents. There's 6 of them right there. That isolation has really given us a great advantage because we're seed growers. And what we need more than anything is isolation from problems that other neighbors would give to us. Insect problems, pollination, cross-pollination problems, and like that. So our isolation, we're surrounded up by the North Maine woods on 3 sides. And the nearest potato farms were in the potato belt of northern Maine. They're to the east, and we rarely get a wind from the east in the summertime. Now, we've been farming organically almost 40 years. We've been certified organic since 1982. Organic farming is a system that's based on the concept of working with nature. It relies upon natural systems and natural inputs to grow healthy plants through the use of developing healthy soil, and those healthy plants have a natural resistance to problems from both insect and diseases. Those of you that are organic farmers and have already figured this out, those of you who haven't, you sometimes have to cut through the clutter because organic farming has a lot of enemies in the world today. A lot of them are biotech companies, chemical companies, institutions that are financially invested in maintaining the status quo. And I think many of us would agree that we have a system that is not working right. Many would argue that it's a dysfunctional system, and certainly the corporate dollars that have worked their way into politics. As we've heard earlier today, some of the irregularities of how our government is operating, I think, can be traced back to this unsavory influence of, especially of money. Money is not given by corporations without expecting something back in return, and I think that's a large part of the problem that we're facing. So the main crop that we grow are organic seed potatoes. Our corner of Maine, as recently as the early 1950s, was the #1 potato producing region in the United States. In recent years, the production has shifted out west to Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, where they can get higher yields than we can because of their irrigation. In a normal year, we don't need to irrigate. In a normal year, not that we get normal years anymore, But in a normal year, we get rain spread out throughout the summer, and almost all of my neighbors have no capacity to irrigate. In our case, we do. I could talk all day about potatoes, but they've given me an opportunity tomorrow morning to present on potatoes. There's a 2-hour workshop that I'll be presenting at about growing organic potatoes from 8 until 10 tomorrow morning. So I hope that if that is an interest of you, that you'll come and join us. Oops. I put this in about 5 years ago. We had an exchange program in New England. Organic farmers from Vermont and Maine traveled to Denmark, toured organic farms in Denmark, and then the next summer we had 25 or 30 Danish organic farmers come and tour New England. This picture here was taken at a farm about 45 minutes outside of Copenhagen. And what's significant about this farm is that it has been in continuous agricultural production for 6,000 years. Ever since the Nordics ceased being hunter-gatherers in this area, that was 6,000 years ago. And I have that slide in because I think that part of our problem is that the United States is a young country. We've only been here a couple of 250 years. You know, we have friends in Maine and down East Maine that are 9th generation farmers, and we think, holy cow. And this goes back to when a 15-year-old Scotsman emigrated from Scotland to down East Maine, and Passamaquoddy Indians showed him a great place to set up a grist mill and a farm, and he did that. But when we're talking about Denmark, we're talking about 200 generations of human beings. So I think it is helpful for us in the United States to recognize that we're a young country, and just like young people, whatever is young makes mistakes, and I think that's what we've done in this country, and I don't think it's too late. I think that we can turn it around, but I think that gives some perspective. I think the Europeans have much to teach us because they've been doing things a long time, and I think their systems, their skepticism of GMO crops, I think that we ought to look at that and try to analyze what's the difference between Europe and the United States. So one of the crops that we raise, and we're benefited because of that isolation, is organic seed corn. And this is a variety. Dorinny is a short season sweet corn from Canada. It was an heirloom released in the 1920s, and it's an excellent quality corn. Its biggest problem is it came in right when hybrids were getting going in full speed. And hybrids are a way to get farmers involuntarily, in some cases, to buy seed from the seed company every year. Those open pollinated varieties like we grow as seed growers, the seed industry got frustrated because farmers would buy once or twice and then they'd save their seed and never come back again. Hybrids gives the seed companies that area of control, and in my view, hybridization was the first generation of taking control away from farmers where seed has resided for 10,000 years and given it to an elite. And my belief is that genetically engineered crops is the second generation of taking this resource away from the people, away from farmers. How do they do this? Patenting, that's how they do it. Essentially, what a patent is a monopoly issued by the government to an individual or to a corporation. A monopoly or a patent issued by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office must meet certain requirements to be legal and to be constitutional. Part of that, it has to be something new. If it's not new, it's not deserving of a patent. Up until 1980, there had never been any patents issued on life forms in the United States. Then in 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court issued its first ruling which legalized the patenting of a life form. It was a bacteria developed by General Electric, and it was used in helping break down oil spills. Within a few years, the Supreme Court extended their rulings to where they extended plant patent or patenting to seed. And this was very pivotal because I can guarantee you that if there was not patenting involved, Monsanto and the other 6 or the other 5 chemical companies that reinvented themselves in the 1980s and came to call themselves biotech companies and began forcing their way into the seed industry, taking control of seed resources. If it wasn't for patenting, they wouldn't be in this industry. And that's very significant. Now, what is it that causes many of us to be unhappy about the patenting of life forms? There's a book which I would really recommend everybody read. I've met the author. Her name is Dr. Mary Wood. She's an environmental law professor. For many years was at University of Oregon, and in recent years has been at University of Idaho. And this book explains in very great depth, but it's a very readable book. It explains the concept of the Public Trust Doctrine. And this is quite interesting to me. A lot of people, a lot of lawyers have never heard of this Public Trust Doctrine. And I think that it offers one of the solutions that we in agriculture really need. So, a couple of slides describing it. The Public Trust Doctrine essentially says that there are elements of the commons, elements of nature, to which the government simply does not possess the authority to privatize. How do they privatize? They privatize through the granting of monopolies or patenting. So, and this concept goes back over 1,000 years to Roman times, where it was clearly established that the water is an asset of the commons that belongs to all of us. In more recent times, this concept has been extended to other elements of the commons, the air that we breathe. And the idea is that the government simply lacks the authority to privatize. Well, what does that mean? I'll give you an example. Imagine if a new factory moves into a town near you, and this factory emits pollution through the smokestack, and they go to the government and they say, listen, we're going to provide a lot of jobs, we're going to provide a lot of tax revenue, but there's no way that we can do this unless you grant us a permit to be able to pollute the air, because that's just the way it is. So the government says, well, there's going to be a lot of benefits here, so yes, we'll give you a permit if you give us some money, and we're going to let you pollute that air. Well, what about the family that has a child that's got asthma, and they suffer from that? What the government has essentially done is taken the asset from the commons and privatized it. They've given this corporation, this factory, the ability to pollute and to lessen the value of the asset owned by us, the people. That is something in defiance of this Public Trust Doctrine. And the Public Trust Doctrine, it's the basis of our entire legal system. It goes back to the Magna Carta and before. It goes back to English common law, which is the basis upon which our entire system has been established. A couple of U.S. Supreme Court decisions actually brought this into the text of law under which our nation operates. In 1892 and 101 years later, in 1983, this Public Trust Doctrine was validated by the U.S. Supreme Court. In recent years, there's been an expansion of thought, well, what else is in the commons? And many of us feel that seed, which was handed down by your ancestors and my ancestors for 10,000 years, that is an absolute crucial asset of the commons. Originally, you take a crop like corn, and it was originally a wild grass, and it was our ancestors that, working together through selection, turned that wild plant into something that could be a food source for people. And now what we have is a major crop, maize or corn, in this world. Part of what sustains life on the planet was developed by our ancestors. When the government allows the patenting of seed, for example, when Monsanto or another of the biotech companies makes a minor genetic manipulation through the use of a gene gun. They shoot a gene in. They create an event that then they go to the patent office. They claim, well, this is different, and we deserve to get a patent on it. And in fact, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office grants these patents. But really, why would this not be considered theft from the commons? Because we, as the people, we were never compensated with a royalty payment, yet 99.9% of the value of that corn, that was part of the commons. So for the federal government to grant this patent is highly suspicious. It should be noted that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office makes money on every patent that they approve. Every Tuesday in this country, on average, 4,500 patents are approved by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And if you multiply that out, that's 200,000 patents a year. And essentially, a patent is one more reason, one more thing that Americans are prevented from doing. It's one more step away from the freedoms that we have been guaranteed by the Constitution. In a normal year, 4,000 to 5,000 patents are able to be challenged in court. And within the patent community, the understanding is a patent is not valid until it has been shown to be valid through a court action, but you're talking a very small percent of cases. It's a very costly thing. Patent lawyers get about $800 an hour for their work. We've got a patent system which the corporations have done a great job at retooling to their own benefits. But would anyone like to make a guess of these 4,000 to 5,000 cases a year that are brought to court? What percent of patents are found invalid when brought to court? Anyone want to hazard a guess? I heard 5%. 50%. Half of all patents, when challenged in court, are found to be invalid. So if you extrapolate that, we're granting 200,000 patents a year, and very close to half of them are invalid. How's that for a system? So it's for many reasons, many of us feel that seed is part of the commons, seed is part of the ownership that we have all together, and that the ownership of seed should lie in the hands of farmers, the way for all but the last 125 years, out of the last 10,000 years, all but the last 125 years, it's been that way. Farmers have had complete control of the seed supply, but it's been handed off. What I wanted to do was read a couple of short excerpts from Dr. Wood's book, and I think she puts in good context what we're talking about. The Public Trust Doctrine speaks to one of the most essential purposes of government, protecting critical natural resources for the survival and welfare of citizens. And then she continues, seed patents represent one of the most alarming efforts to date to privatize a natural resource long thought to be common to all. Intellectual property law has responded to this corporate scheme by allowing patents on transgenic seed, creating private rights not formally recognized. In other words, the seed supply, a life source previously treated as part of the commonwealth of all humankind, now becomes subject to privatization. So, not only am I a farmer, but in a voluntary capacity, meaning I don't get any money from this, I'm the president of the National Trade Group for Organic Seed, and it's called OSGATA, and that stands for Organic Seed Growers and Trade Association. I was a founding member of that group. I serve as its president now. We started it up about 9 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, and we have three primary missions within OSGATA, and it all involves organic seed. One is to develop the organic seed trade. Two is to promote the organic seed trade. And three is to promote organic seed and the farmers and the companies that deal and trade in organic seed, and thereby the farmers that buy their seed from us. So it's probably this latter function, protecting organic seed, that we're most well known for. We developed this policy in the blue, and it was something that was, we ran it up the flagpole, went through committee, went through the board, we put it out to the membership vote, and it was a nearly unanimous vote of the membership, but I'll read it, it's pretty short. Contamination of organic seed by genetically engineered seed constitutes irreparable harm to the organic seed industry and undermines the integrity of organic seed. Any detectable level is unacceptable. And that is a standard that our seed company, our family lives by. Many seed companies live by that. If you take organic seed that has been contaminated by GE content and plant that seed, you can be guaranteed that the harvest that you reap in the fall will be contaminated. It's our belief that integrity demands of organic seed growers that we withdraw from the market any seed that we find to be contaminated with GE. And you can imagine what a costly venture this is. Not only might you lose the production from 1 year if you get drift contamination come in, but in some cases you might lose a genetic resource that you've been developing for many, many years, because GE contamination is of an unrecallable nature. But we feel that this is the ethical position for seed growers to take. We feel that when organic farmers and organic gardeners come to us wanting to buy organic seed, that they expect it to be free of GE content. And our responsibility is to meet and exceed the expectations of the consumer. This slide from 2011 from the Organic Trade Association, they had a white paper. I think this is a good illustration. A private organic dairy in California, Strauss Family Creamery, they conducted an extensive test of almost 2,500 samples of corn, which they were buying in as feed for their operation. What they found was that over 30% of that corn, organic corn, certified organic corn, was contaminated by GE content. If that seed had been, or if that corn, if those samples had been organic corn, that meant that if you had 100 seed farmers and 30 of them were out of luck. The crop they grew that year, they got no income for, they might even have lost that genetic resource. This is what I consider a crisis. Part of it is because of the mobility of corn pollen. It's relatively mobile. Part of it is because of the close interaction. You've got organic farms that are in close proximity to non-organic GMO farms, and when the wind blows, if there's a common window of pollination, you can get that contamination. But I think this illustrates what kind of a problem we have. It's a serious problem, and it is threatening the survival of organic farming as we know it. So, almost 4 years ago, at the end of March 2011, my organization, OSGATA, became the lead plaintiff in a major federal lawsuit against Monsanto. We filed the lawsuit at the end of March in federal court in New York and Manhattan. The lawsuit came to be known as OSGATA et al. V. Monsanto. The et al. We had 83 different plaintiffs, which were individual family farmers, independent seed companies, and agricultural organizations, including some of the certifying agencies that you here in this room are certified by. Within that plaintiff group, we had over 300,000 citizens in the United States and Canada, and we had approximately 25% of all certified organic farms in the U.S. and Canada that were part of this lawsuit. So there were two things that we were going after. One was that we were seeking court protection under the Declaratory Judgment Act so that farmers, should they through no fault of their own become contaminated by Monsanto's patented genes, that we could not be sued for patent infringement. The second reason is that we had one of the best patent attorneys in the United States working for us, Dan Ravisher from the Public Patent Foundation in Manhattan. And after we went to him and described the problem that organic family farmers face, he felt that Monsanto was in violation both of U.S. law and the U.S. Constitution, and that the seed patents on transgenic herbicide-resistant transgenic seed crops were invalid, that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office had made errors in granting these patents, and we were prepared to prove in court in an effort to invalidate Monsanto's transgenic patents. So immediately after filing this lawsuit, Monsanto began their legal maneuvering. As is typical of cases like this, they tried to deny us standing, to deny farmers access to the court system. This went through several stages. We were given a federal judge, Naomi Buchwald, in New York, that many of us, and I was in the courtroom during the oral argument, as were 55 other family farmers from the U.S. and Canada, and it was the opinion of many of us that she had already made up her mind against us before she even heard the oral argument. She did eventually issue a ruling in which she ridiculed the farmers, claiming that we had gone to court kind of as a publicity stunt, that we didn't really have anything to risk, that there wasn't any substantial controversy. We immediately appealed this to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in Washington, D.C. I'm giving you the thumbnail version. Believe me, court action goes very, very slowly. So this was drawn out, but we had another oral argument in Washington, D.C. In that case, I think we brought in 35 family farmers from all across the United States and Canada to witness that hearing. A couple of months later, the three-judge Court of Appeals panel issued its ruling, and we consider the ruling a partial victory. The three-court appellate panel repudiated the federal court judge, agreeing with the family farmers that we had every right to be in court, that contamination by GE patented material was inevitable. And I think they were trying to do their best, but here's a problem farmers always face. We've got people outside of agriculture thinking they understand agriculture. So they tried to establish a corrective action for this. There's a judicial order called an estoppel. And they basically issued an estoppel which ordered Monsanto to make good on their words that they would not go after a farmer who suffered contamination. The estoppel read that any farmer contaminated by trace amounts of transgenic material, which the court defined as 1% or less, could not be sued by Monsanto. And this was the first time in the history of the United States that farmers achieved any level of protection. The problem is it was an incomplete protection. And for that reason, that's why we appealed to the United States Supreme Court. It was 1 year ago in January that the U.S. Supreme Court passed over our case. You know, the way it works, the Supreme Court has offered about 8,000 cases a year, and they only have time to take 80 to 100 cases. So you have a 99 out of 100 chance of not being picked up. And that was the case with our case. Because of that, the decision reverted to the U.S. Court of Appeals decision, which now stands. So in some ways, it was a bigger victory than we had expected, because we were going, you know, when you go to court, you have plaintiffs, and the ruling would pertain to the plaintiffs. In this case, it pertains to every American farmer farming on American soil. It's not just those within our plaintiff group, but every farmer. So it's an imperfect victory, but it's a victory. It's a start. And as I think somebody's slide this morning, maybe it was Robin, said, you know, you gotta make steady progress and go towards, you know, towards your end goal. So that was a 3-year effort. I think it helped educate people. I think a lot of people starting out did not realize that under U.S. patent law, you don't have to be intending to possess another's patented material. You don't even have to be knowledgeable that you have possession. But if you were in possession of another's patented material without having signed a licensing agreement, you were open to litigation for patent infringement. And it's an incredibly unfair situation when the innocent party has to be the one to protect themselves. And if you go back to English common law, it's always the owner of the potential harm that is restrained in their activity. If I've got a herd of cows and you're my neighbor and you have a beautiful field of clover, it's my job to build a solid, secure fence to keep my cows on my property so they don't hurt your nice field of clover. That has worked for hundreds of years in rural America as the way we treat our neighbors. It's the golden rule in practice. We treat them the way we want to be treated. We restrain the harm. We don't cause our neighbors harm. We restrain that. 30 years ago, biotech comes in and they throw the table upside down, and now all of a sudden, innocent organic farmers have to take the buffer on our side of the fence. It's our responsibility to prevent Monsanto's patented material from contaminating our crop, which then they can assess because we have their patented material. And one thing that every one of the plaintiffs in our lawsuit had in common, none of us are customers of Monsanto. We don't want their seed. We don't want their technology. We want nothing to do with them. So, of course, we never signed a licensing agreement, and that is the only thing that could have given us protection short of going to court. That's why we went to court. We were disappointed because we thought that the basic American right is the right of self-defense. We went to court getting that. We were denied that opportunity. We never were given the opportunity to argue our case. We were denied standing. So the victory that we got, it was a partial victory, but we don't feel that justice was served. And, you know, we send our soldiers to war to defend the interests of the United States. It seemed to us as farmers that one of those was to have access to the court system. So essentially, the ruling of the Supreme Court didn't give us what we were after. We've got partial protection. There's a lot more work to be done. One thing that I'd like to tell you about is this book. We've got free copies of it in back. This is a book, a peer-reviewed book that OSGATA has written, and it's entitled Protecting Organic Seed Integrity, the Organic Farmer's Handbook to GE Avoidance and Testing. Some of the speakers this morning have illustrated how there is an increasing market for not only organic but also non-GMO crops. A lot of the corporations that Robin was referring to, they're starting to see that consumers want food that is not GMO. If you're going to grow it, if you're going to get into that market, you've got to understand how to protect your crops to the greatest extent that you can, and it's not a perfect system. But this book, it's written in layman's language so that farmers can understand it. We had 3 PhDs peer review this. It's gone through a lot of work, and it has a breakdown crop by crop, corn, soybean, beet, whatever genetically engineered crops are available as of publication a year ago. It has specific steps that farmers can take to protect themselves. If the courts aren't going to protect us, we're not going to lay down and play dead. We're going to protect ourselves because in the end, organic farmers are the solution for a lot of agriculture's problems, and we've got to protect ourselves and defend ourselves. So with that, I'll be happy to take a question or two.
I've got a question pertaining to the patent. Is it true that for all patents that they're just approved for a certain amount of time?
Yes, I'm not a patent attorney, thankfully. I think it is limited. For example, Roundup went off patent 8 or 9 years ago. So it did go off, and that is what led to the use of glyphosate as a desiccant for crops like, for conventionally grown crops like wheat, dry beans, oats. They're flying on glyphosate as a desiccant to speed up the harvest, the ripening process, the drying process. So yes, there is a limit to that. It doesn't go on forever. It may seem like it, but it doesn't go on forever.
Do you think that there's going to be a concern that when some of these genetic modified seeds run out of their patent, what's going to happen then?
Yeah.
Like maybe a situation like, I think.
Well, what I think they'll do, what they've already done, is they'll tweak it just a little bit, and then they'll put a new patent on this new thing saying, oh, this is new and improved, it deserves a patent. And something I might add, when Monsanto or one of the biotech companies goes to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, they say, this is a new invention, it's worthy of a patent because of its newness, its uniqueness, and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office grants them that patent. Then they take the very same invention and they go to the FDA, and they said, this really isn't any different than traditional corn or soybeans. And the FDA, operating under this fallacious idea called substantial equivalence, established in 1992, which has no scientific basis. It was strictly a political decision. But then the FDA says, well, jeepers, I guess we're not going to make you label that crop because it's substantially the same as traditional crops. So they get it both ways. It's a dysfunctional system. It is not serving the people. Part of the reason for that is we've got this revolving door that the regulators, they work in industry, they come and work in the government, make decisions which help their friends back in industry. After a few years, they go back to industry. That is who's doing the regulating, and it's not working well. Yes?
Yeah, I worked in the U.S. Patent Office from 1970 to 1974. The patent is good for 17 years, is what it amounts to. But I would say that most of these ones that go to court are all patents that they were put in litigation because the examiner at that point found another patent application at the same time. So immediately you are ordered to stop on that patent, and it goes in the court system, and that's who they litigate in the court system on who actually gets the patent. And I know I was reprimanded several times by my boss because I was too hard on issuing patents. I had a real low issue rate. I think it was 20% of the patents I got issued by me. But essentially, it came about that if the company with the most money was one that got the patent.
In our lawsuit, what we were prepared to prove in court, we had different lines of arguing patent law, and one of them was based on a ruling in 1820 by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Story. And in this very famous court opinion, he ruled that if you were to apply, if you had a poison and brought the poison to the patent office to apply for a patent, it would not be qualified because a poison lacks social utility. It lacks value for society. We were prepared to argue in court that Monsanto's genetically engineered crops violate the utility clause and were therefore unconstitutionally issued by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I wish we had gotten that chance. That's how the system is supposed to work, yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you or not. I was in an argument a couple of weeks ago with the University of Missouri researcher. I was trying to talk about genetic mutasis versus GE versus hybrid. What is the difference between those three processes?
Well, yeah. I'm not the one, we've got PhDs here that are going to do a better job, but there's a common misperception, among our seed customers. A lot of people not just our seed customers, but a lot of people within organic think that hybridization and genetic engineering are two different things. And now every year, the biotech industry is coming up with novel applications that they are trying to slip by. As bad as the regulatory system is now, they're coming up with new things. Transgenic means taking genes from one species into another, and they're now doing some manipulations within the species, trying to get around, I think that they're trying to get around what is already a pretty poor regulatory process. But hybridization is where you've got, we're seed growers and all we grow is open pollinated, to where we save the seed and it comes back true, and we do slightly modify this through the selection process. We select ear that's corn, for example, that's well anchored, that resists being blown over, that has early maturing ears. We have a friend, an organic farmer friend in Michigan, that started out with a corn that was 120 days in length, and in 5 years through selection he was able to reduce that to a 90-day variety in 5 years. That's what we can do with selection in OPs. Hybridization is where you take two similar parents, cross them in a specific manner, and it becomes an F1 hybrid, to where the offspring from that, if you plant the seed back, it will not be true. But we have organic seed farmers within our organization that are dehybridizing. If they come upon a hybrid, there is a process to where you can grow that out, and through rigorous selection you can dehybridize this, and it's got a lot of promise. Some of the modern varieties have great qualities, but if it goes to hybrids, then the farmer is entrusted to the seed companies to provide that seed. And many of us, we don't want to seed that right. We want seed ownership in our hands and the people's hands.
Are you against hybridization?
No. We have members within OSGATA that are raising organic hybrids. On our farm and the majority of our farms, we're working with open pollinated. I think personally that it's a superior system because it allows us that regional adaptation, which is a far superior system. And one of the top organic seed researchers in the United States, Dr. John Navazio, who has worked at Organic Seed Alliance in Washington State and University of Washington, and has recently taken a job as the plant breeder at Johnny's Selected Seeds in Maine. He has famously said many times that if we had gone down the path of improving open pollinated varieties back 70 years ago and put as much focus in breeding OPs, that we would have OPs every bit as good as the hybrids that we have now. It's simply because of neglect. It's not because of a deficiency of OPs. But the money for the seed companies is in hybrids because it forces a customer to come back every year. Before I get that, anybody else here? I've got time for one more question.
Jim, can I?
Yeah, Brian.
Could you explain what the National Organic Program's standard is for contamination of crop and of seed, and what OSGATA's position is on that standard?
I think it's an evasive position. I think there's an effort to kind of sweep it under the carpet. As I understand it, the NOP's idea is that, well, if you made an attempt to not get contaminated, we're just going to look the other way. And I think the problem with this is you've got this widening credibility gap between what organic is becoming and what the organic consumer paying that premium is expecting to get. When I would say that 99 out of 100 organic consumers are going to assume that the organic food they're buying does not have GE content. And as far as our industry, the organic seed industry is concerned, we think that that's a very legitimate expectation, and that is what we are going to provide them. Once you get into food, meaning going for humans, or feed, meaning going for livestock, there's going to be another discussion about, well, what level of contamination is allowed. But in the seed industry, I think we have a responsibility of maintaining a high standard, and that's that any seed sold as certified organic should not contain GE content. That's what our customers expect. It's our job to not contaminate our own community through putting money first and principles second. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Out of time, we'll go to the next speaker. I'm not even sure who the next speaker is, but